Evening. I would start with, somebody whom I revere, R.V. Rajan. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm happy to see, of course, Shekhar one more time. His energy and his ideas always keep inspiring me. I'm also very surprised to see my former neighbor, Prasad. We lived in the same building. Spoke very little until we got caught up on a Hyderabad to Chennai flight and rode from the airport. His daughter and my daughter were very close friends. So it's very good feeling over here. I also, of course, know of Sri Ram, and I kind of keep reading all the work that you do, and someday hope to catch up with you in greater detail. Sure. And of course, can I say that the young and happening Makhdoom? So compared to all of us over here, the youngest face I can see is Makhdoom. So unless you're pretty good at hiding your age. So anyway, thank you so much for having me here. What am I going to talk about today? I'm going to talk about an aspiration that all of us have to leave this world a better place than we found it. This is a latent aspiration. We don't say it every day. We don't tell our children. But somewhere we see something and we say, man, who's going to change all this? Who's going to correct all this? And we let out this aspiration, kind of consume us for a brief nanosecond, and then it gets deluged in everyday problems, business as usual. So I'm going to talk about that. And I think we begin with keeping our mobile phones on silent mode. Okay? An earnest request, and kindly do not take calls here. You're free to disturb me and distract me by getting up and going. That's a lesser of a distraction than having you speak when I'm speaking. Now, what is the topic that Shekhar kind of, intentionally, as conceived by me, mystically portrayed as 21st century Panchatantra? What has the Panchatantra got to do with leaving the world a better place than we found it? Now, the Panchatantra that we know is thanks to Amar Chatrika. A little bit of background about the Panchatantra. Of course, we all know a set of fables, stories. Now, it goes back to the 3rd century BC when Pandit Vishnu Sharma, a Kashmiri scholar, wrote the Panchatantra tales. It is said that King Sudarshan, who was then ruling Patliputra, had 3 sons, Bahushakti, Anant Shakti, and Ugra Shakti. And all 3 of them were duds. So the king calls his council of ministers and says, find me a coach who can take care of these boys. And the council of ministers zero in on Vishnu Sharma. And Vishnu Sharma is approached by the king. And he offers 100 grants of land to the scholar and says, somehow, please, for heaven's sake, get these guys to understand leadership and governance. Because after me, who will take care of this kingdom? Vishnu Sharma says, no, knowledge is priceless. So I will not accept a grant, but you got to give me something else. And he says, what? He says, you got to give me the liberty to plan the syllabus the way I will. And the king says, by all means, as long as the outcome is achieved, I'm okay. And Vishnu Sharma therefore goes on to write the Panchatantra tales, which is a series of animal fables which are focusing on 5 key areas of governance, which is politics, diplomacy, leadership, relationships, and administration. And the way the tales are woven is it begins with an introduction and then goes into another tale, from which it passes on into another tale and another tale, pretty much like the Russian dolls. We've seen those Russian dolls, those wooden dolls, which are the big one and then the smaller one and then the smaller one and the smaller one. Pretty much that way, one story leads to another in the Panchatantra. But all stories, in one way or the other, converge back into one of those themes that are to be taught to the 3 sons, the three princes. Vishnu Sharma went on to live a long life. The boys went on to rule the kingdom. And the Panchatantra tales spawned many more imitations. Popular among them are the Jataka tales, the Hitopadesha, the Arabian form of the Panchatantra, and the French version of the Panchatantra. But the one that's closest to my heart is the one that my grandmother told me when I was probably 5 or 6 years old. I'm sure many of you have heard this. The story of the doves and the hunter. But just so that all of us are on the same page, I'll narrate this story very quickly for everyone. So a flock of doves finds itself trapped in a hunter's net. The hunter is about to converge on them and take them away when the king holds a quick darbar among his flock. He says, guys, there's only one way we can escape this tragedy. And that is, if each one of us does our little bit. So the flock responds saying, yes sir, as you say, tell us what we should do. He says, quick, there comes the hunter. Pick up your end of the net and let's all fly away. They do it and it works. And the flock starts flying, the hunter starts chasing. After a while, like most humans do with their endeavors, the hunter gives up. But the flock cannot give up. So it keeps flying. When the king establishes that they are firmly away from danger, he says, now let's swoop down near that mountain foothill where lives a mouse who's a very close friend of mine. And we will have the mouse chew up the net and free all of us. So the flock follows his instruction and they all go to the base of the mountain. The mouse appears and the king requests him to chew off the net. The mouse responds saying, "O king, I'll do anything for you." And he comes first to the king's side of the net and starts chewing it off, nibbling at it. The king responds saying, "Halt, first free all my subjects and then me." The mouse is, surprised, "Man, what kind of a king are you?" But he goes on to chew up the rest of the net. Everyone is free, and at last the king is free. Two morals my grandmother taught me. One, do your bit. And then the other one, personal leadership always counts. I want us to take away these two important elements as I introduce to you the 21st century Panchatantra. Mine is not a set of stories. I am no Vishnu Sharma. I am just an anguished citizen like all of us are. And I promise you that what I'm going to share with you will invoke soul, provoke thought, and inspire action. Hopefully. And like the original Panchatantra, which were based on the 5 principles of a wise conduct of life, which is leadership, diplomacy, relationships, administration, and politics. This version of the 21st century Panchatantra also deals with the wise conduct of life. And it really talks about 5 baby steps to transform India. Now, why India? Because this is a country which is so rich in heritage and yet is lost. And everyone is hoping that somebody is going to arrive, another avatar of Mahavishnu is going to arrive, a Jesus is going to arrive, or a Noah is going to arrive, who's going to take us to the land of our dreams. And I think if there is an audience of about 25 or 30 or 40 people here, I can see that many avatars sitting right here. And so, allow me to share with you your sentiments about India. How do you solve a problem like India? Over there in that list are all the top headline-making subjects that grabbed eyeballs and headlines all through 2011. Right on top of them is the big C, corruption. And Arun Puri couple of years ago, the editor of India Today, my former boss, while writing in the India Today's editorial, letter from the editor, said, India is a country where we have 1,000 problems for every solution. He wasn't wrong at all. And the reason why there are 1,000 problems for every solution is because we are all obsessed with the big C, corruption. We are fanatic. After religion, the most important thing in our life is corruption. And rightly so. We have a right to be obsessed with corruption. Just look at the numbers. India slipped from 87th position to 95th position in 2011 in the Corruption Perception Index, put out by Transparency International, a global NGO. We scored 3.3 on a scale of 10, which means we were among the most corrupt and least transparent nation. No surprises there. Vivek Dobroy and Lavish Bhandari, two great economists, wrote a book, Corruption in India, the DNA and RNA, and released it in December 2011, where they talk about 62% Indians, that includes you and me, who are guilty of paying bribes. When you tip a policeman, you are as corrupt as the minister who spends 18 months in Tihar jail. Because you have added to the 92,222 crore cash tranche that operates within India annually on the corruption front. That is $18 billion or 1.26% of our GDP. So that's the big C. But the problem with this is that everyone knows that this cat has to be built, but nobody wants to make a beginning because it is truly a helpless situation. Now we can all sit here and be helpless about it, or we can do something about it. We are pretty much behaving like our response to this picture. This picture, as you will stare at it, immediately you would imagine that somebody had a lousy service, was angry, frustrated, and walked away from the table, displaying his feelings using a very creative medium, tomato ketchup. That's what grabs your eyeballs the moment you look at it. But somewhere above there, there is some food on the table. There is a yellow hand pointing to it. That would not be apparent when we look at the picture the first time. As you keep looking at it, it becomes apparent. Now, that's the difference between scarcity thinking and abundance thinking. When every Indian in every forum keeps cribbing about the big C, corruption, we are all soaked, drenched, and drowning in a scarcity thinking. When you turn around and say, so honey, what can I do about this? Then you're talking business. So, when you want to do something, are willing to be doing something, one thing is being ready, the other thing is being willing. We are all ready for change, but are we willing for change? That's where we got the inspiration. When I say we, it actually began with my wife and me. Vani, she's not here right now. She had another engagement at home, so she preferred to stay back. But when we sat down 10 years ago, we said, hey, how are we going to deal with this? What is our contribution to our country? And we were inspired by this great man. So let's start with ourselves. Before we talk about my neighbor, before we talk about the street, before I talk about my constituency, before I talk about my city, country to bahut dur ki baat hai, long way off. Let's talk about me. The second inspiration came from a simple idea. A little boy was once asked by an old man who thought he was very smart. He was asked, how do you eat an elephant? So the little boy thought for a while, concluded that, hey, this could be a trick question. It indeed was a trick question. And responded only in the way that little kids can respond. Simple, uncle. How do you eat an elephant? One step at a time, one bite at a time. So what's the big deal? Similarly, how do you solve a problem like India? The big C is the elephant. Now, how do you solve a problem like India? You don't start by saying 92,222 crores. What's my 50 bucks going to do to that, man? We'll never get started, which is why we are all succumbing to inertia. Instead, look at all those words in yellow. There are a lot of other words like policy paralysis, infrastructure, inequality, female infanticide, blah and blah and blah. But just focus on the yellows. Hunger, education, garbage management, drunken driving, video piracy. 5 areas which all of us can contribute to in a positive manner, in a constructive manner. And that's where the 21st century Panchatantra presents its 5 principles for the wise conduct of life. Do whatever you can. Do it within your circle of influence. Do it well. Do it now. And do it without fail. So, my 5 steps for transforming India, which can be yours, are: feed someone daily. Educate a child. Don't drink and drive. Avoid plastic bags. And don't encourage movie piracy. I'll quickly walk you through all of them with a disclaimer first. I have no commercial interest in any of these 5 areas. Number 1. Number 2, the statistics that I'm going to present are probably well known and questionable as well, because the source is the internet. So do not get led by the statistic alone. Please draw essence from the concept. That's more important than getting into data integrity, which may not be 100% accurate, but we've ensured it. It's somewhere in the high 80s or 90s. Okay? So the first principle is, can we feed someone daily? A third of the world's hungry live in India. That's 275 million people. As we sleep tonight, 200 million Indians will go to bed hungry. 7,000 of them die daily. 5 of them every minute. I know we all do our fair share of Annadanam. We do our charity, somebody's birth anniversary, wedding anniversary, somebody's having a celebration, whatever food is left over, we go and give it off. But the problem is humongous. And it cannot be solved by one-off acts of largesse and generosity. So for the last 10 years now, we have been doing a simple task. Whenever possible, we do it ourselves. Otherwise, we put a process in place to make sure it's done every day. Which is, we spend $100. Pick up some food from Sangeeta or Saravana Bhavan. Take a drive around our block. Take a drive in newer areas from time to time. The hungriest person on the street that we see, we stop the car, get down, go to the person, look him in the eye, and give it to him or her, and connect at a soul level. The kind of energy it gives is phenomenal. It makes you realize how immaterial and inconsequential you are with all the material benefits that you and I enjoy, and how important that person is who gave you an opportunity today, this moment, to serve. It makes a difference to that person, all right, but it energizes you to go back the next day, and the next day, and the next day. A small act can make a difference. If each Indian who has the ability to eat food, thinking it's his or her own blessing, starts feeding the have-not, we would have eradicated this problem. We would have eradicated the problems. Work out your math. Go Google the numbers. 200 million is not a difficult number to achieve. The second principle is educating a child. 25% of our country still remains illiterate. This despite the fact that we have 1.4 million schools and 220 million school-going children. Yet, look at the other side of the story. 35% of kids who make it to class 5 can't read and write. For every 100 that enter class 1, only 7 emerge out of class 10. And that's because 25% of the government schools, teacher vacancies still exist unfilled. The only foundation, the only organization which has got as far as they have, is the Azim Premji Foundation. And that too in their work in the last 10 years. And they have touched, not a small number, they've touched 20,000 schools and 2.5 million children. And the foundation reports these numbers saying it's just not enough. People, please do something. And this is despite Teach India campaign, this is despite all the efforts that you and I probably contribute to here and there. Somebody comes and says, I'm educating children in this school, this is an endowment, please write a check. Immediately we are happy to write 2,000 rupees despite that. So if we just look at the constituency around us, the maid, the istriwala, the driver, the watchman, the corporation sweeper. Do we even know the corporation sweeper's face? Take a minute away tomorrow. Walk down. Understand why the garbage on your street is not lifted. And you will see that he comes from a background where he doesn't want his children to go into the same routine. He is willing. Are you willing? You may be ready, but are you willing? Now the big question would come saying, hey, I'm willing, I'm ready, but what if the kid doesn't understand English? Man, you don't need to educate in English. You don't need to educate in Tamil. You don't need to teach math, algebra, physics, astrophysics, metaphysics. You don't need to teach all that. Education also means, can you give the child an ability to express himself or herself through vocational, maybe computers, maybe art, maybe movies, acting. Get into the life of these people and you will find enormous opportunity to transform a next generation which is going to come up. And you can prevent them from becoming corporation sweepers and drivers and maids, and instead bring them to Rotary clubs and make them sit where you're sitting. My third principle is drinking and driving. I'm guilty of drinking and driving and crashing my car 10 years ago. That's where my transformation happened. Right here, up behind Nilgiris on Sivasami Salai. Luckily, the car was a write-off, not me, and nothing else happened. That night I promised my kids I would never do it again. 50,000 Indians die annually. That's a small number in 1.2 billion. Who's worried about 50,000 Indians and 1.2 billion Indians? Aur aa jayenge by the time the statistics are updated. But that's not the point. The point is the way they die. Alcohol consumption has gone up 20 times in these 20 years. It's growing 15% annually. And you know the reason? Because first of all, our law is skewed. The blood alcohol content of 0.3%, 0.03%, which is legal, ensures that there is a 1.4 time chance of a crash. By the time most of us Indians finish what we call in Kerala a small, or in other parts of India, hey, come on, let's have a drink. By the time we finish that session, we have had 3 to 4 larges. And that means our blood alcohol level is somewhere between 0.05% and 0.09% depending on body weight and height. Which means we are always prescribing death warrants for ourselves. One of them, the famous one is, I'm having only beer. The other one, I'm steady man. I'm steady. The third one is, hey, one for the road, man. Don't go like that. We're meeting after so many years. Every time we say that and we take the wheel, believe me, we are writing a death warrant, either for ourselves or somebody else. This is a picture of a Tata Group company CEO who was holidaying in Mahabalipuram and was returning in a call taxi back to the airport. And his car was hit by another car which had a drunken driver in it. So it can happen there, and many of us sitting here have had one brush somewhere in our circle of influence with somebody succumbing to drunken driving either by their own doing or by the doing of somebody else. And most importantly, just spend a minute thinking about the next generation. When your 18-year-old starts driving and starts drinking, then you get palpitations on how is it that he's going to manage. And you should ask yourself, what have I been teaching him or her? The fourth principle is
avoid plastic bags. Chennai generates 250 metric tons of plastic waste daily. Only 3% of it is recyclable. And it takes 100 to 1,000 years for a plastic bag to disintegrate. And plastic bottles take forever. Just step onto your street, stop your car, look around, and you know that we are borrowing from the next generation. It's not that we are spoiling the legacy bequeathed to us. We are borrowing from the next generation. And this is the way we treat Mother Earth. So when it's Independence Day, Republic Day, we say, Mera Bharat Mahan, we wear all that. And we, we'll sorry to you, be very, very blunt, but would we, do something with our mother? That's exactly what we are doing with planet Earth, our own world. And this is how, of course, every street in India looks. Now, we expect Ramki Enterprises or Envirotech to come in and solve our problems. We expect Saidai Doraisamy to come and solve our problems. What are we doing about those problems? So the next time you're throwing away a beer can, a can of Coke, Pepsi, a plastic bottle, start thinking, can I have a recycling system in my car park? Can I dedicate 2 cartons? Can I walk down and segregate them? And can I call the local kabadi wala? And most kabadi walas are organized in the recycling business. They just don't find enough support from homes like yours and mine. And my last principle is, don't encourage movie piracy. Now, why movie piracy? You understand plastics, you understand drunken driving, you understand teaching, education, feeding, all that is fine. But movie piracy, why should I support the rich guys? My dear friends, it's not about the rich guys. It's about you and me. Ma'am, I like your handbag. The lady sitting next to Sriram.
I take it.
It's fine if she gives it to me, but what if I steal it? When I go away, what if I steal it? Now, would you steal somebody's handbag, somebody's wallet, somebody's pen drive, somebody's laptop? When you download a movie on BitTorrent, or allow your children to download something which is somebody else's intellectual property right, you are actually encouraging cheating, stealing, which means every Indian household is guilty of a crime. We are as criminal as those guys who are ripping off Colgate, Pepsodent, whatever. We are as guilty. So, but then in India, anything free is a kick. Even if you had $1 million, if somebody gave you something free, you would say, come on, let me take it. We got to change there. I changed when I saw Lagan. When I saw the quality of filmmaking, when I saw the effort that's gone into it, the intelligence, and then I saw that somebody was selling that same movie for 25 bucks on the streets of Mumbai, I said, until then I used to watch pirated movies. That was the time I stopped. Then as one grew older, the reality kind of sank in, that possibly there is a deeper connection to corruption. Because when you think of downloading something which does not belong to you, and watching it without paying money, and you gloat over the fact that, what you're basically saying is, na vandu benami, na vandu fraud, na vandu thiridan, mera baap chor hai, was written on Amitabh Bachchan's hand famously in Diwar. I think we should all pachakutufai. Nano or thiridan, because we do this. Now, thiridanukke entha adhikara irukku to stop and say, Pradhan Mantri, Mukhya Mantri, Mantri, tum fraud ho, you are a fraud. How can a thiridan stop another thiridan? So if we got to cure India, we got to cure ourselves. This is where it begins. So, watch the Russian dolls come out. Pretty much like Vishnu Sharma's story of one story leading to another. When you are actually feeding someone, you're actually connecting with human beings instead of computers. You're going beyond Facebook and you're looking at the look in the face of that person. And you're saying, man, thank you for helping me serve you. Educating a child means creating a different generation of Indians. Helping somebody lead India effectively. You and I will be gone, but are we going to have a situation like what is there today, that if this goes away and this comes, it doesn't make any difference? It's the same damn thing. So we all sit, columnists write, TV opinion makers talk about it, nothing really happens. Nothing will happen until you and I change. Not drinking and driving means inculcating basic traffic sense into people. So once you start that, then you'll start wearing your seatbelt. Then you'll start parking your car right. Then you will halt your car properly. And if a cop asks you for a bribe, you will say, give me a challan, no problem. I'll pay a higher value. Because you're now thinking in terms of doing something constructively. Thinking about garbage means you're thinking about the planet, which you don't even think about otherwise. Nice to shop, nice to discard, who's bothered about the planet? And finally, of course, every story must have a killer application. Like Google is a killer application. Internet is a killer application. Like that. In the 5 principles that we have tonight, the killer application is movie piracy. Because it's about personal integrity. Integrity is always defined as what are you doing when nobody is watching. It's not about when everybody is watching. So when nobody is watching you and the family watch a movie on your computer or on a pirated CD, that's where integrity comes in. So it's about personal integrity. It's about teaching your children. It's tough. I had to have several conversations with my children to convince them that this was not the right way of doing it. But of course, they're all doing it. You're just being a pain. You're too old. And I would say, I'm not old. I'm old enough to tell you what is right and what is wrong. And most important, when you do something as simple as stopping movie piracy, please remember, you then have a right to go and stand on Marina Beach or Jantar Mantar and say, I am against corruption. So I am against corruption is ahead of India against corruption. So do what you can. Do it in your circle of influence. Do it well. Do it now. And do it without fail. In conclusion, I want to leave you with something very profound that Andre Agassi, that unbeatable tennis player, talked about when he was inducted into the Tennis Hall of Fame last year. He was asked, how do you want to be remembered? And in reply he said, I'd like to ask myself the following questions. Did I leave the world a better place? Did I create more than I consumed? Was I grateful for every day I was given? Did I do enough for the next generation? Will the things that I built continue to produce results long after I'm gone? He says, I'm not concerned about my legacy. To hell with my legacy. But if I can say yes to each of those 5 questions, then I have done something worthwhile in my journey through this planet. We all have the same opportunity. I'm also reminded of Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore, and I have a slightly different, more contemporary take. I have a dream where the mind is without fear, where there is no hunger, where there is health, hygiene, peace, prosperity, and love. Into that heaven, O Lord, may my country arise and awake. I want to leave you with the 5 principles one more time. Even if you start with one of them, you would have made a beginning. Feed someone daily, educate a child. Please don't drink and drive. Please avoid the use of plastic. And do not encourage movie piracy. These are baby steps. But if each Indian starts doing them, we will have a new India. An India that our children and their children will be proud of living in. So don't expect miracles on the big C. But there are 5 other steps that we can take, which will take us to that big C. Thank you so much for having me here. If there are any questions, I can take them quickly.
everyone is overall India.
I think we are so overwhelmed by that.
John. Probably I'd like to add one more sixth point there. We should take up farming. All should take farming. So I think though we only have 21% of the GDP contribution for agriculture, but I still feel that we are losing on that.
Definitely, I think, it's not limited by 5, but if you take a concept like farming, for example, it takes a certain amount of effort to get to that point of action. Whereas the 5 that we've picked up are, I wouldn't say they're